Okay, and we're back. So Councillor Coburn, would you care to ask your question?
Well, hopefully I can be more succinct this time. I was just wondering if you have seen a strategic plan out there that is colorful, inviting, informative, that we could look to. I'm just looking at the town of Blue Mountains and it's pretty spiffy. I like it.
So the great good news we have is we have an awesome team here now. And so I'm confident ours will look a little different to it has in the past. So I think there's lots of ways. When we were talking about the layers earlier, I think there's a way in which we can come up with something which does work in paper and has the ability to drive down into layers and link to other things. And so I think as we go through strategic planning, we'll be looking at how that links into our website. So the information, the way in which people can drive down to find out will be important. I think the accountability piece, and I've seen some good examples of ones which have dashboards, so that members of the public, members of council, members of community can check in and see what progress is being made. And again, I'm confident with some of the work the team's doing this year around us getting into some of that. In terms of specific examples, we'll circulate a few. I would say since we did our last plan, there's been a fairly dramatic shift in how these are done. And so I think that the new plan will look quite a lot different. And I think there will be, we can structure it so that we still have a printed product, but there is the ability for it to be linked to other stuff for those who want to dig a bit deeper.
Did you pull up the latest Grey County plan? It came in front of council 2 weeks ago.
Yeah.
It was fairly simple.
Yeah.
A lot of items to be done, but each one easily understood, I felt anyway.
And I think the other thing to bear in mind is we'll build this, the layers approach definitely works. So this will tie to budget. So a lot of the detail will actually start coming out through the budget conversations and the business plan. So one quick question before we move on from vision. And I want to just quickly go to this is what stands us apart from perhaps I'm not going to pick on Owen Sound because Owen Sound is quite clearly it's a city, we're a rural township, but perhaps what stands us apart from perhaps Chatsworth or South Bruce Township or North Bruce is quite dramatically different. I know that we're all unique, but what might make somebody go Georgian Gloves is different from Chatsworth? I apologise for picking on Chatsworth. Chatsworth residents in the house as well.
Water.
Shoreline. Water.
All the associated recreational activities and forests for hiking and ATV trails and snowmobile trails.
Topographic features, right? You've got bluffs, you've got caves, farmland, rolling hills, flatlands.
Community of communities.
Well, that was coming back around.
Stay with the municipal government for long enough, it will come back out. Okay, so water, shoreline, associated recreational activity, love it. Okay. We're going to move on a little bit. So we've been way up in the clouds. We're now going to bring it back down a little bit. So thinking about all the way up in the clouds type stuff we've talked about. So let's see all of the way up in the clouds stuff. So let's now start thinking about what does all of that way up in the cloud stuff start looking like in terms of actions or activities over the next 5 years. Now, this is obviously, we're just starting this process. It's going to take a lot longer than 20 minutes around this table. But so perhaps rather than, I mean, if you've got specifics, then great, let's hear the specifics. But if you've got groups of activities that you think might be focuses that we need to start focusing in on, what are the activities? And I'm definitely sensing economic development has come up a couple of times in various different ways. So I think, and that's something that was in the last strategic plan. Maybe we just carry on and provide a little bit more of a focus around in the future and the actions around it. But what are some of the activities that might sort of fill into some of these gaps? So some of the things that came through from the pre-work. So we talked a little bit today about township property. We've got a whole bunch of property out there. Do we make the best use of the property we've got? Are there other ways we should be doing it? Do we even know what property we've got, and where that property is? And so that kind of is, well, I suppose we're starting with some of the shoreline work, but there's another body of work, which is we've got a whole bunch of parcels of land here, there and everywhere that's sitting there. Are we making use of them? Should we be making use of them towards supporting natural environment? Are there employment and business uses we could be making of those? Should they be lands that we actually look at, moving off and looking for somebody else to take on? So one of the ideas that came through was a township property review. There was quite a strong theme that came forward, and I'm not surprised to see this. I would be surprised if I didn't see it, to be honest. Is core service delivery is going to remain an absolutely critical part, I suspect, of any municipality, and even more so perhaps on smaller rural municipalities, is roads and sidewalks. So I think sidewalks made it onto some of your list, but roads was definitely there. So we have to make sure that we're focusing on the core services, which really are why we're here, the nuts and bolts of being the municipality. So some of the things that came out, which again sort of tie into the employment business, there were some of you that reflected the fact that we need to think about new employment lands. We need to look at perhaps how we open up new housing lands and what housing might look like. And again, that touches on some of the conversation from the CIP this morning. A couple of folks mentioned in that, again, the word that was used this morning is we might need to look at, and it might not be something that I suspect we're not doing it in 5 years, but we certainly might look at wanting to look at and consider what future servicing might look like in this township. And if it's something we want to explore a little bit further to support some of the visionary type stuff. One or two people mentioned water system sustainability, making sure that we, again, focus on those core services and making sure that people, when they turn the tap on, it's good water that's coming out of there. Not just good water today, but good water in 5 and 10 years' time. We had a comment around making sure we've got affordable recreation for people. The natural assets came out again in terms of the 5-year sort of plan, as did climate. So there were some of the things that you shared before we got to today's discussion. But what other things do you think we really should be focusing on over the next 2 to 5? And I say 2 because 2, obviously, that's definitely within your control, and hopefully you'll all be keen to rerun for another 4 after that. But what's in the 2 to 5 year window for you?
Catching up on all the things that we're behind on, legislatively required things that I may not be aware of, like the sign reflectiveness and other, yeah, and anything else we're unaware of, or I'm not.
I think that alludes to the core service. Let's get back, it's not roads and sidewalks, but the core services is where the focus should be on.
Yeah.
And I don't want to use the word fluff. There's a lot of things in municipality that we like to be part of, but our focus and our mandate is core. The other stuff's important, but I think sometimes we lose sight of what that is.
Yes.
Yeah, I agree. I'm happy to see that there. I'm looking at the Gray County one that Sue suggested, and their priority number 1 is continuous improvement in operational efficiency and service delivery. So that's got to be, if we're not doing that well, then you got to wonder how much value there is in all the rest.
Yeah.
You have all the fluff in the world, but if you don't have those core values in place and the core work, people can't get in and out of the township because you haven't got the roads up.
I'm glad you used that word, because I was reluctant to use it. Now that you've used it, it's acceptable.
So I'm going to unpack that one a little, and I am going to use the word fluff because I think we all know what we mean when we say fluff. Is that's really interesting, because pretty much everything we've spoken about up until the point that went up on this board is all optional. All of this stuff, everything from the last 2.5 hours excluding lunch, or 2 hours excluding lunch, all of this is fluff. So economic development, visitors, natural environment, sustainability, climate, all of those things are areas that municipalities can not do anything about. We can legislatively focus on looking after our roads, looking after our water, picking up some garbage, we're job done. So we can focus on that stuff. And certainly that's a large amount, arguably 3/4 of the municipality is focused on those core services right now. There's very little that we've got in terms of doing the other stuff around the outside. So I think, and I'm not asking for an answer now, this is the $1 million question, is how much should we dedicate, are we happy with where we're at from a core service? Do we need to get better at our core services? And if we need to get better at our core services, do we have any capacity left for any of the other stuff? Are words like economic development simply beyond us? And I use that as an example because that's certainly when I look back at the last strategic plan, that's why economic development was one of the areas which fell off, because it was simply beyond the capacity organization to manage. And so that really comes back down to the whole realism piece. So I think, as I say, not something I want to crush the conversation on today, but I think if we get to the end of this, we have to balance the fundraising and the realism with the fact that we have got these fairly big pieces that take quite a lot of resources to look at.
I'm going to throw in there too that when we're looking at core services, I'm going to take a hypothetical bridge that doesn't exist. I don't have a specific place in mind.
Well done.
Not talking about one of our bridges. But if we're looking at that bridge and replacing it, which is like, we can look at it that from the cost perspective, it has to happen. How are we fiscally going to be responsible? We can look at it from an environmental perspective. We can look at it from a user perspective, making sure that cyclists and pedestrians can cross the bridge safely as well. So those fluff things don't have to be on the outside. They can be lenses through which we look at many of our core services.
So I think that's an interesting, it's a good way to look at it, is that we might not actually be doing these things, but maybe we think about the way in which we do things with a lens which reflects on those things.
And I do want to make sure that I state that I think we need to be fiscally and environmentally responsible for our current constituents and also those who are going to be here in the future. And we're leaving them with assets in reasonable shape and the finances in reasonable shape and an environment in as best shape as possible.
Certainly changes how I think about vision. I don't want to lose the aspirational side of things, because if we're not moving forward, then we're going to get lost in the dust. I mean, I don't want our new tagline to be Georgian Bluffs meeting your basic needs.
Well, you put different words. You put different words on the same thing I got written down on my piece of paper. So, and I say this recognizing the position I hold, and I say this with my tongue placed to some degree in my cheek, is as a new resident, having been involved in council conversations and everything else like that. If I wasn't staff and I'd just been involved in those things because I was an invested resident, I might think that our vision was lowest tax rate.
Well, I was going to say that because we have always touted that as our biggest asset.
So the way you put it is spot on. Lowest tax rate in Grey County. Both of those could be visions, and they're very justifiable visions. So there is nothing wrong with us, for example, saying, and I should say that if we don't say we're the lowest tax rate, that doesn't mean that we should instantaneously jack our taxes up to be the highest tax rate in Grey County by any stretch of imagination. I don't think fiscal accountability and responsibility to our residents goes out the window. But are we more held to being better at core service delivery, delivering better services, maybe looking at some affordable recreation, maybe stretching out to some of the natural environment stuff? Is that more important, or is just focusing on basic services, like come here because we've got reasonable roads and we pick your garbage up once or twice a week, and we've got low taxes, maybe.
Yeah, maybe.
Concession funds.
Sometimes. But sometimes we pick up your garbage. That's a really good conversation to have, I think.
So this strategic plan that is for the next 5 years. So yeah, we probably need to be thinking what is reasonably done given the resources that we can afford.
So I think, yes, that's where start. But I think where we're going to craft this is we might, over the next 5 years, look at, that real focus on core service delivery and everything else like that. But we could do that with a vision to creating a safe and inclusive community. So the vision can be big, and then each section within it can be realistic and measurable. So what I'm trying to say is we could have a vision which sets us up to an expectation that by 2050, we're going to continue to have the lowest tax rate. And the chances are what we're probably going to be doing at that point is focusing fairly specifically on our core service and legislative compliance piece. Everything else we're going to be looking at, but from the view of not really moving the needle forward, but looking at our own stuff to make sure we're doing the best we can from an environmental or climate perspective and stuff like that. Alternatively, we could look at something where we are deep into the stewardship game. We're, working in partnership with the Conservation Authority to enhance wetlands, do tree planting, working with community, to work on economic development with servicing some lands to bring in some new business and stuff like that. Now, we don't necessarily need to do all of that stuff right now. We can start paving the way for it. I think knowing whether the vision is, the word that comes to my mind is constraint, but that has negative connotations. I don't think it is constraint. If the vision is to remain the lowest tax base and deliver just focus on basic services in 2050, it changes the first 5 years. Doesn't make the next 5 years any cheaper or more expensive. But if the vision is something different, then we can, with the first 5 years, may still see us as the lowest tax base in Grey County, but working towards something bigger.
So going back to your core service delivery, roads and bridges and that.
Yep.
We are the second lowest tax base in Grey County. And we're in the position we're in today because we are the lowest tax base in Grey County.
Is that something to be proud of?
Right, and I'm not sure I'm really proud of the fact that we closed 2 roads, 2 bridges, because we don't have the funds to fix it. So I think there's got to be a correlation of where we don't maybe necessarily need it to be the lowest, but we need to have the core services to attract those people to come, because we can provide the basic necessities. That's my thought right now. Like we're the lowest because, but we don't have what we do need either, right?
Yeah.
We're talking about gravel roads, we're talking 5-year plan. Personally, I didn't sit well with me when I heard that number, but again, that's where we're at.
Yeah. So you compare it to some other municipalities, you're quite right. So we've done some work on our gravel road costing this spring, and there are other municipalities for whom they will put maintenance gravel down on 100% of their gravel roads every season. That may be overkill, may not. We put it, as we discussed the other night, we're down to 5 years, and that certainly leads to challenges like we see on some of our roads. So we can certainly focus on this stuff, but if we've got a vision which is accepting of the fact that that means that the dollars and cents are less important than the service, which one is more important? And both are important. It's not that we're going to say core service is important, doesn't matter how much it costs. It's always going to matter how much it costs. But is core service getting a little bit better at core service, building in maybe 1 or 2 of the other things around the edges of that? And I want affordable recreation in terms of that as well at some point. Is building improvement in those sorts of areas with the recognition that there may actually be additional costs that need to come with that. Is that something that we should have our eyes open to as we go through this and the next strategic plan cycle?
I feel like we have our feet on either side of a bit of a timing fence. Like 20 or 30 years ago, what our constituents, what our residents wanted is very different than what we're hearing from our residents of today.
I agree.
So, but we're still stuck in, we want to keep our tax rate low, but we can do that and maybe meet our core services. But how do we meet all of these others? Others have referred to it as fluff. Just for the record, do not see it as fluff. But there is pressure for us as leaders in our community to tackle some of these bigger issues. And we can't do it with the same philosophy that we councils 20 years ago may have had. We have to change our mindset.
So one of the things that I wonder at is with the trajectory we've been on, trying to keep the taxes down at the lowest in the area, we're more and more affecting those core service deliveries.
Yeah.
And I think some here will remember Meaford going this road a number of years ago and having to come back and say to their residents, it's 5 years of a 10% tax increase. And I think if we keep on this trajectory, we're gonna be there if we don't do a correction now and say, we don't have to be the lowest or second lowest. We can move up and add some things to that and prevent double digit.
The reason I asked that question the other night, what was the time frame and the gravel road frequency of 5 years? It used to be 3.
Not,
That's the cost of materials going up.
Right.
We as a township haven't kept up with that.
right,
So it was specifically done for a reason. It wasn't to belittle staff. It was to pay attention, because it used to be 3 and now it's 5.
right.
We haven't increased the budget for that core service.
And that's exactly what I was thinking, you know, to me, 3 years seems like more of a, to be on top of it would be a 3 year, not 5 years, you're starting over again.
So I think what I'm definitely getting from this conversation is that this and these are really going to be, these have to be really quite strong focuses, certainly for this first iteration. But that we can still have a vision which is much broader than that, because there is some appetite for, let's make sure we're getting these right. Let's not go crazy in terms of dollars or anything else like that, but let's not feel that we necessarily need to be constrained to, you know, if we need to adjust a budget to make sure we're doing a better service, let's bring that rationale to council and have that conversation is what I think I'm hearing.
So would,
Which I have to admit, as a staff member,
It's not a month after we approved budget.
I take your
Working
point.
toward
on
the
that
end,
one.
but
I take your point on that one as well.
so
As a staff member, I'm loving what I'm hearing.
So would it be safe to say that 80% of what staff deal with on a daily basis generally is something to do with core services?
Yes,
Garbage, roads and sidewalks,
yes.
right? So that's where we're,
80
Water,
plus,
trees.
right, exactly. So that's where we're failing.
80+%.
It isn't about,
No,
for the
no.
recreation.
This is a lot of this stuff that happens around
Right.
is really nice. And I think a lot of us would love to get into it a lot more. But the reality is that, yeah, in the order of 80% of our time is spent on cutting grass, trimming trees, looking after roads, paying bills. It is that.
And that doesn't mean that we ignore some of the other things. So for example, when a pickleball association is on our lap, we're not going to say, well, we're focusing on roads and bridges. So no, like we will, it's flexible enough to that we have our vision and we know where we want to see things go. We can still incorporate some of this.
And another good example of where council's done that recently is climate change. So you've taken some steps towards an environmental initiatives officer, which is the environmental initiatives officer is probably going to spend 80% of their time on, and again, I'm going to use the word, and I hope we all recognize this isn't undermining it, but they're going to spend their time on the fluff that we don't actually need to do. They're going to spend 20 to 25% of their time using a climate lens to help shape the stuff that we do. But they're also going to spend a lot of time doing the stuff which we don't need to do, but is really good. And we've heard from community is really good in terms of setting leadership aspirations, showing leadership, inspiring action in others. So there are areas where we step beyond that, but yeah, most of it.
So the pickleball aspect too, tying that does kind of correlate back to core services for the fact that it's our facility.
Kind of and kind of not. So this is an interesting one. It's why I wanted to pick on this one. So if we move into this sort of affordable recreation, I can't remember, may have come up in one or two of the responses that came through, was affordable recreation. So I did want to pick into this and a little bit, because actually, no, our community centres, they're optional assets. There is no legislation, there is no municipal guidance or anything else like that that says you must have a community centre. In fact, there's lots and lots of municipalities that don't have any community centre at their disposal. I'm not saying that's what we should aim to be, but I think we need to recognise that we've got the facilities master plan that will trickle through over the next couple of years. But I think we need to recognise that we have some really old infrastructure. Kemble Arena is really old, Derby Arena is really old, and to be honest, Shallow Lake is getting up there in age. It's not as old. I mean, Kemble and Derby date from the 1960s, 1970s, and Shallow Lake is from the 1980s. But the 1980s doesn't feel that old. Is it like
77, actually, on the plaque in the lobby.
There we are, 77. It was a great year because it was the year I was born. And so Concorde flew first that year as well. So actually, Concorde flying that year really does demonstrate it. We've had a supersonic jet had its entire lifespan enclosed, and we're still running the arena, and I'm still here. So I think I think though that it doesn't feel like the 70s were that long, but those pieces of infrastructure are 50, 60, they get up there. So they're old. They're not falling apart tomorrow, but they are going to fall apart at some point, and they're very, very expensive. So I think there's a really important question around those community centres and the affordability of those community centres for the tax base, for the people that use them, and for us as a municipality. And I think that's going to be, again, a conversation that we might need to pick away at. So what does affordable recreation look like over the next 5 years? And beyond, perhaps. Do we have 3 community centres? Do we need to be open to that? Is it that we want to have them, we want to reinvest in community centres so they can be more sustainably used? Do we want to, as Councillor Winters, Rick, you said earlier on today, do we want to get into the business where we're actually a little bit more aggressive in some of the programming that we perhaps offer in those facilities? All of this, of course, is fluff. Nice fluff, important fluff, and fluff which is important.
I don't think all recreation is community centered based. Too. So we have our beaches, Sarawak
Yeah.
with the mat for folks to get down to the water, making sure the trails are in good shape and making sure whatever barriers we put in place where we don't want ATVs are maintained, and making sure we keep good relations with the ATV club and keep doing those beneficial things that have happened. So just keeping that in the picture as well. There's a lot of things that happen and outside.
And I think there's more
Yeah.
could be happening in community centers than sports. So could a community center have an area devoted to a daycare that we provide the space for somebody to run a daycare through? So that helps the whole community. Could it be set up to have a health clinic come in once a week, that type of thing, so that residents, especially seniors, don't have to travel outside of their community? They can go to that community center, and it involves a whole lot more than kids and people going in to play a sport. I see them as a larger, I mean, if schools are needed, Oxford County, Zorro Township, Oxford Library, and the school board down there are working on building a facility that will fit everybody's needs in one building.
Yep.
And I think we're looking at things like that coming back in.
Yeah, and from a stats perspective, on average right now, I checked these out the other week for something else actually. On a stats perspective, across Canada, it's approximately one community centre or one arena in one building for about every 10 to 15,000 people. So based on a stats perspective, the township has 3.
What was the population? Was that for all population?
It's all population, and it reflects all population densities. So, it's actually, you actually have slightly worse density of people to community centre in urban areas. When you do you can drill down on those numbers a little bit further, and it tends to be a higher number of population per community facility in urban areas than it is in the rural areas. It's about between 10 to 15,000 in rural municipalities. Now, community centres apply in different ways. Libraries, which are up as community centres, you can deliver those services in different ways. I think this, for me, out of a lot of the conversation over the next 5 years, I think this is the one which in my radar is hanging quite high up, because we're going to have some tough decisions to make in the next 5 years around what this looks like toward the long-term vision. And a lot of that will rest on when the facilities master plan starts coming back in.
In my mind, the only arena we really have is Shadow Lake.
Yeah.
We have 2 other facilities. We're arenas that are now just buildings.
Yeah.
But they were all based on ice. Well, community, but ice.
They're regular.
They were ice sports.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that was pretty much the total focus of them.
And lots of opportunity in that to reimagine what those, because if we think, are we going to rebuild an arena in Kemble? Chances are we're not going to rebuild an arena in Kemble, because there's a reason we don't put ice in there. Are we going to rebuild a community centre in Kemble? That's a very different conversation to rebuilding an arena. And I think that this is you know, this is where when we get into this, I think over next, I was pleased to see this come through because I think this is going to be a big conversation about trying to think what recreation is, what affordable recreation is, what sustainable recreation is going to be. And it really does tie to pretty much all of that as well. But just to come back to, none of this is core business of the municipality. This is in many ways, this is what the residents will love, and this is what defines and helps shape a community. But actually, the government doesn't care if we close them all down and walk away because they haven't legislated that we do.
But it adds value and a reason for people to live here.
Oh, yeah.
But so I wrote down recreation. I didn't write down affordable recreation, though I think that's a good comment. I think what I wrote down maybe was accessible recreation. And that means social too. It's not just, you know, baseball bat or a lacrosse stick. But we want it located where it's accessible to a lot of people, and we want it accessible to all age groups.
And that again is another, it gets complicated. Again, it's a little easier in a city because you plonk a building down and you got 20,000 people which within, you know, 300 meters of that building or a kilometer of that building. You plonk a building down in Shallow Lake, and Shallow Lake may be, from the stats perspective, it may be one arena for 15,000 people, but that doesn't make it any more accessible to somebody who lives in Oxford or in Kilsyth. You know, it doesn't, it really doesn't help with that accessibility perspective.
So I can see that being, like, again, if we go back to the must-haves as opposed to the nice-to-haves, that's something we look at down the road, and we maintain hopefully status quo and build on what we've got for now. But we have to get these other pieces to a state where we can be proud of them first.
I would want to see us take on more than we can realistically handle, like taxes, or infer we'll get something done.
No, for sure. Yeah.
I think the other thing about creating a strategic plan that focuses first off on the core services is that's very easy for all of us to explain to anybody who asks us about it. That this is where our main focus is. Then we're going to start to work out on these other things.
I have a few things which haven't been talked about yet on my list of things to throw up. What about? So my what abouts. Talked a little bit this morning. I want to drill down a little bit on. So truth and reconciliation. I'm going to throw those ones out there as well. We mentioned the fact that we've got rights holders we need to talk to when it comes to strategic planning, visioning, and all those sorts of pieces. Truth and reconciliation. So is truth and reconciliation something that we should be embedding within our strategic plan at this point? Do we feel that organizationally the time is right for us to be, you know, really putting something out there and prepared to think about some actions? And when I say actions, really these are actions which are already written for us. So the TRC has 50 calls to action and so on and so forth. So there's a bunch of things that we can literally just take from that and start applying on a local basis. Is this something that we actually want to put some focus on? And again, it might be less a new piece of business and more a lens through which we do our existing business. Is it something we should reflect and talk about?
I see it as part of the lens, no different than equity and diversity and the green lens. I think all of our decisions need to be made through that lens as well. I think that's more effective and meaningful in the end than having a one and done project that addresses that.
Great. Going to take the silence as no dissenting voices, which is awesome. So I think we can take that one on board. I wouldn't mind picking away a little bit, again, some of the conversation we had this morning rolling into this afternoon. So, and again, these are slow burners. I don't think anything necessarily changes quickly, but we can certainly start moving the needle towards future change in terms of new housing, new employment, business attraction, retention. We've got that economic development thing that's hanging out there. And the big one there is servicing. So I think, are we interested in, and as I say, just because of the dollars and cents that are associated to this and the amount of time it's taken in planning for these things, I think we all said, yeah, let's look at servicing. I don't think we're servicing anything in 5 years. I think it's a slow burner, but if we start planning now, then maybe we're servicing something in 10 or 15 years. If we don't start planning it for another 5 years, it's going to be 20, 25 years before we get there. Is thinking about long-term development in the township something that we need to focus a little bit more at? And that really speaks a little bit about some of the work that might happen within the planning sort of sphere of things around settlement areas and so on and so forth. Is that something that we need to be paying some attention to over the next 5 years? Again, I'm seeing some broad lines.
It kind of ties into with the township properties that we have available too, right?
Yep. Oh,
Like we're all on the same page.
Yeah, where we've taken a lot in a subdivision for parkland.
Right.
If we're not gonna put parkland there, do we have to keep that vacant lot sitting?
yeah, well, those ones are horribly complicated, but maybe, yeah, yes, good conversation to have. We should at least have the answer out there.
We should at least know where they all are, and can we move
Yes.
forward with them, or are we stuck with them?
Are we just mowing them?
We're not even doing,
Oh, well, we're not even doing that on some of them, no.
just,
Still, the neighbors aren't happy, but
another question that came to my mind, affordability. Do we want to talk about affordability? And affordability, I throw affordability out there. Affordability, just like accessibility, is a huge term. Affordability could be transit, affordability could be affordable housing, it could be looking at densification, planning targets, it could be looking at servicing. Is affordability a lens again that we need to apply here? Is that something we need to be maintaining in the back of our mind? Again, affordability turns around to tax base and stuff like that. So,
so for who? A senior
yeah.
on a limited income, or somebody that's making 100,000, like define affordability?
Yeah, so a lot of plans include things like a focus on affordability without really giving any direction as to what that is. I have to admit, I get very nervous around the word affordability because it's so open to interpretation, much like next year. If you don't quantify it in some way, I might throw affordability out as a term. If anyone's got any comment, it might be something that needs to go away and have a bit of digestion about.
It can be tied into servicing of lands and planning future developments, what the policy looks like.
Yeah, and I think you mentioned earlier on is if we don't look after the natural environment in some ways, we don't do climate change in the right way sometimes, the affordability in 20 years, 25 years time might be very different.
Affordability is only going to come into factor once you have a core services established, right?
Yeah.
What's left? Good enough left in them anyway.
Unless there are areas of our municipality where we have the ability to, what's the word you use, densification? If I do see that as a planning function and a function of our zoning, if there are things that we can do to create appropriate space for more affordable housing, I think we ought to be doing that.
Absolutely, there's 3. So our official plan already hints at where that could occur. So, or the emerging official plan kind of hints at where those focuses could be. You know, we've got Brook, the Brook Springmount corridor, Shallow Lake from a partial servicing. Shallow Lake is complicated, but you know, if the township was going to explore at any point in time putting in a wastewater treatment works, Shallow Lake is probably fairly high up on that list of places that we would look at. That would open up some densification potential in Shallow Lake. And then the system we do have, or the system we will have, is the East Lincoln corridor down into Elmsdown. So there's sort of 3 areas which are kind of hinted at the minute, and we can certainly look at maybe doing some work over the next 5 years to perhaps colour those boxes in a little bit and talk a little bit about what it might look like.
On a different level of affordability as well, I feel like there's possibility with our neighborhood municipalities and some of the organizations that are operating within them, like the partnership with Safe and Sound, or donations to Safe and Sound this year seemed like a good extra thing that we were doing.
That's a really good point, actually. So that's another one that we haven't really talked about a great deal, but partnerships was in, I know I've spoken to pretty much every single one of you, and you're all keen on partnerships. We've got into a couple recently, and we've obviously got long-standing partnerships around the biodiversity and so on and so forth. Is that smart, different way of working? I hate the word innovative because everybody uses the word innovative, but maybe that's where our innovation lies, is looking in those opportunities for efficiencies in working in partnership with neighbouring municipalities. And so maybe some of that partnership work with agencies and municipalities is something that we continue to reflect. Awesome. Do we want another break? Or are you happy to roll into the next exercise, which I think will only take 15 to 20 minutes?
Get her done.
Let's get it done. And also, I think it will help our clerk, because it means we don't have to stop live streaming, start live streaming again. This is my pet. Okay, so I'm going to do less talking in this one.
I'll stay back over here.
So there's more than enough, so I'll send some around this way. This is just a cheat sheet just to help you through, but you can ignore any of the words on there if you want. The large part today is really to think about the values. So we're going to do some work with the staff team this year, identifying the values. These are values which we want to treat community with, we want community to treat us with, that you want your colleagues around the council horseshoe to treat you with. These are the ways in which you want to work with staff and see staff work with you. These are, in some ways, if the vision is the why and the strategic plan is the what, these are the how. These are the how are we going to achieve the vision. Are we going to do it in a way which is we're going to just motor on through and come what may, we're going to knock people down left, right, and centre as we are on our way to the destination, or are we going to work in collaboration and respect? So you can use the list, but the list is by no means an exhaustive list of the sorts of values you might have. Just do some words down on a piece of paper so you have in front of you as sort of catchwords. If you want to take just a few minutes individually, and if you do need stretching legs, you can. If you want to get out of the room for a second, then feel free to. But if you want to take, maybe we'll take five or 6 minutes, and as an individual exercise, maybe circle, check off, or scribble down, maybe 3 to 5 value statements. When I say 3 to 5, I suspect you'll recognise all of these values as being something that you hold near and dear to. But if push came to shove, what are the 3 to 5 values which you think every single piece of business that we do as a township really needs to hold near and dear to its heart? Way in which we teach each other, way in which we treat community, and so on and so forth.
People don't. Reach them.
I think you're pretty good down here.
We're doing
Somebody puts some words in front of you.
Yeah, I know. I should ignore them.
Point in the day, I'm happy to have a menu of things to eat.
That was me last night when I was trying to read on my laptop and I finally gave up and just printed it because I could go sit in comfortable for a read. But I could not sit in front of that laptop any longer.
Next week. ITFT.
Yeah. Which is kind of somebody else.
Yeah, no, I'm good with that.
Maybe the chair or something.
I'm going back to the office.
Just then.
Yes, you didn't say no. Did you get that from Sarah?
What's for me?
Well,
From Super Buzz.
that's his email.
Okay. So let's start off the sheet. Has anyone written down a value which is not on a piece of paper?
I wrote down local history and I wrote down agriculture. Because to me, those are like, for me, top, big two, most important. Core part of me, for sure, in my opinion.
I'm gonna try to do this by a show of hands then. Commitment, anyone?
What are you asking us? Did we, what?
Yeah,
check off?
if you checked it, I'm gonna try and get through and figure out if we've got some that bubble to the surface. So commitment,
We committed.
honesty,
Can I just add, I added openness because someone can be completely honest with you, but if they're only giving you half of the information that you need,
nice.
that needs to be there too.
So I had this
Not
added the
that that's
same
ever happened.
openness and transparency in all decisions.
So I saw 4 hands for honesty and openness, transparency type. Okay, open-mindedness, respect. Oh,
I put respect. I didn't put honesty because I feel like that's something you show instead of say that you are, but it's a value that I really believe in.
And it's something as a council and a municipality, we should just be.
yes. So we are going to take these away. We're going to be doing some work on them. So what we're not just going to take words off a page and that will be it. There's going to be some comeback and everything else like that. So respect.
I converted that to respectful.
Okay. Just 1 or 2? 2. Right. Trust.
See, to me, trust isn't a value. Trust is the result of the
It's
value.
something-
That's the impact. Yeah.
Still one.
Still 1. Personal responsibility. Accountability. 4. Challenge.
Didn't know what that meant.
Me neither. Cost conscious. Just for full disclosure, I just copied and pasted a list off the internet, so. Cost consciousness.
I put that. I think it ties back in nicely with the idea of a budget.
Yeah.
Better consider fiscal responsibility.
Yeah.
Have we got fiscal
Yeah.
down here somewhere else?
Yeah.
Okay.
Did we? In all honesty, I ignored your list. I made my own.
Well, that's fine. Determination. Drive. Empower. That's an interesting one. Growth. Hard work.
I put up hard work.
Ownership. Accessibility. Boldness.
Yeah, that one.
Creativity. Education. Ethical.
Yep.
Environment. Impact. Innovation. Good. Fair.
To be fair.
Sustainability.
And if I could just say in the definition of sustainability, that's fiscal responsibility, it's social responsibility and environmental responsibility. So that's why I didn't pick some of the other things.
Because we wrapped up.
Makes sense.
Makes sense. Yeah. Vision,
Yes.
compassion, empathy, social responsibility. Again, I think social responsibility and sustainability kind of tie into each other. Social justice, teamwork, inclusivity, mutual respect, community,
At the center of why we're doing it.
Yeah, we're not.
See it as a value.
Yeah, exactly.
No, it's not, it's why.
If we're not doing it for community, why are we doing it?
Yeah.
Communication, courage, curiosity, belonging, diversity, equity. Equity again.
Yeah, you could almost, diversity, equity and inclusion to me all go together.
Inclusion, okay, so inclusion as well. Did everyone get inclusion?
It was up to, it was
We
the
got the
second
D, we
bullet
got the
point
D
as
and the
well.
E. We got the D and the
I
E.
stuck to the 3 to 5, so.
Leadership,
I think having leadership is important.
Yep.
passion,
Leadership, doesn't it?
ooh, better do. Selflessness,
I've got down.
That goes with the leadership.
I think
too, I
it's a
think.
good trait.
and human and animal rights. Okay, that's useful. I'm not going to do any more with that than just go through that. We're going to have some good conversations over coming.
So I had one more that I would somewhat add to that, which would be thoughtful and considerate of all the needs of everyone, what's best for everyone in the community.
That's a lot of words.
No,
Thoughtful.
thoughtful and considerate of the needs of the whole community.
The common good.
The common good, thank you. Really just pared that down in a much fewer.
Maybe sit at that. She's going to get into it more. Okay, so that really wraps up the session. I do want to talk a little bit about what next steps look like in this. So as I said, we have engaged a consultant. Her name is Jodie. She's going to be looking to set up one. She's got a whole bunch of things she's going to be working with us on. She's going to be setting up one-on-one meetings with you, and we'll be flexible on how you want to do that. So if you want to do it by Teams or by Zoom, she can do it by Teams or by Zoom. If you want to do it by phone, she'll do it by phone. If you want to do it after hours, she'll do it after hours. If you want to do it in hours, she'll do it in hours. She's also going to be up in the township. She's going to be doing some coffee chats with community. And so there's lots of opportunity for her to tie in her one-on-one with you in person. And if you wanted to do more one-on-one, more than one-on-one with her, then feel free to. The reason we're giving you this opportunity is you're not talking to staff and you don't have each other looking at each other as well. And so the opportunity you might have to have conversation with Jodie, delving into some of this stuff. We're going to send her all this stuff so she's got it before the conversation, so she's got a little bit of a sense of where your head's already at. Also gives you an opportunity to unpack some of this stuff with somebody as well. So Jodie will be facilitating connections with each and every one of you through Jodie. Jodie will also be doing some copy workshops with community, some focus groups with community, and helping arrange that statistically valid survey for us to help with some of those community outreach pieces as well. We'll be doing engagement activities with the staff team. We'll be doing some engagement activities with community. So there'll be some stuff on Engage coming out. There'll be a focus for the Connect and Collaborate event that comes up here. We're also probably going to be trying to do some outreach work on the strategic plan and community events and activities over the next few months as well. So through the balance of April, May and June, expect quite a flurry of opportunity to get involved in this in different ways, shapes and forms. Of course, any of the surveys that are online, you're also more than welcome to participate in any of the in-person engagement activities. We would welcome your input and support in as well. So this really does just kick off. All the stuff that we put down on the board will really help start framing up some of the conversations we can have later, which is why we wanted to have this conversation first, to really start getting some ideas of where your heads are at. So are there any questions about the process? In terms of the team that's leading this forward, this is something which is on my work plan. It's very heavily on Haley's work plan. She'll be doing a lot of work on this. And Britt and Michael will also be closely involved in the whole of this process. So very much to be led by a small staff team. It's going to be something which is also going to lean very strongly on the leadership team. And as I say, there will be opportunities for the entire staff team to participate in this process as well. Okay. Thank you so much for the time.
Thank you.
Thank you to all of the staff.
Yeah, thank you.
For sorting out all the tech problems, I'm sure that was frustrating. Feels better. It feels like it's a little cooler.
It does.
The other way.
Maybe the wrong age and gender for this.
If you are, I am as well.
I'm pretty sure that I can feel heat coming out of that.
Okay, so the recommendation is that the council of the township of Georgian Bluffs hereby moves back into special council at 2:34 PM. Could I have a mover and a seconder, please? Deputy Mayor Pringle, Councillor Coburn, is there any discussion? Call the vote, all in favor? Okay. Do I just carry on, Carly, or do you have to switch things over there?
Good.
Okay, so confirming bylaw, the recommendation that bylaw number 2024-021, being a bylaw to confirm the proceedings of special council on April 12th, 2024, be read first, second, and third time, finally passed, signed by the mayor and clerk, sealed with the seal of the corporation, and engrossed in the bylaw book. Could I have a mover and a seconder, please? Councillor Winters, Councillor Shoalhaze. Any discussion? Call the vote. All in favor? That is carried. Last one, and then adjournment. Adjournment. Mover and second, Councillor Coburn. Councillor Shoalhaze. We are now adjourned. Adjourned. I can announce we're adjourned.
We're done.
Dispute that.